Thank you, Skip. As Skip mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the technical side of things and what it is that we accomplish exactly by implementing XBRL Global Ledger. Everything that we've done and are doing revolves around mapping to the XBRL Global Ledger taxonomy, and it's implemented in a dynamic way, so it's pulling directly from the two separate accounting systems that Skip mentioned, which are Dynamics and AMNet. We then use Excel to import that data directly in for KPI analysis and other applications. And an important point that I want to make on that is that XBRL is XML. So it can already be imported into applications like Excel, which many people are familiar with. It can already be used for many other applications that are already out there. And I think that's a very powerful piece. The bottom line with what we actually did is we utilized the Global Ledger data to automate internal financial reporting processes for key performance indicators, audit worksheets, and we freed the data. So we're now able to make reports the way we want to see them, and we aren't limited to how the data is stored in two separate systems. So just a little more background on the accounting system. We have the membership database, named that, where accounts payable, accounts receivable, all the event data is held, membership, all that's in there. We have Microsoft Dynamics, the general ledger package, where accruals are run, budgets are held, and FRX reports is run out of. So naturally, there's some disconnects between the two systems. As Skip mentioned, we run summarized exports out of AMNet. So the accounting systems don't really talk to each other. They run on summarized exports, so you can't get down to that detail level. The next disconnect is different staff require different data sets. Naturally, as in many companies, there's an internal control process to limit the amount of people that are able to have access to the accounting packages. And then the CPA happens to be the finance department. So the marketing person has to come in, the salesperson has to come in, ask for a different report, have the finance department run it, and then send it over. We've been able to kind of overcome that barrier by getting the data pulled out in the XBRL GL, since we completely bypass those accounting systems in a way that gets it into an intelligible report. Right in Excel, we're running pivot tables, pivot graphs to sort of make sense of that data. The next disconnect is, are the numbers right response? Staff can't see the underlying detail, again, because of the summarized way that we export from database to database. We're now able to show them the detail, freeing up the finance department and Skip to do higher-level analytical type work, instead of just sitting around and going, oh yeah, that accrual is in, or yeah, we did that reclass and the number is right. So we've had some previous solutions of trying to yell our accounting systems to work, but that didn't work too well. So we found our solution in XBRL Global Ledger. Back to the mapping. As I mentioned, the mapping is the core part of all of our XBRL applications. We use Alternative MapForce, one of the vendors out there that sell mapping software, also some other XBRL software, XML software also. So that involved identifying the correct information we wanted. When we first started, we started with just period balances in Dynamics, just to see how it worked and what we can do with it. And again, from that was when we realized that that data can be pulled right into Excel, where you can run pivot tables and pivot reports, graphs, and also feed that data into other applications right from there with minimal effort. And I thought that was a very interesting piece. And so we progressed further and decided, well, we did that, why don't we take everything? So we got down to the transaction level for both systems, down to every detail we can get. We put also event detail, so we can run sort of trends on our events and instructors and different venues. So we used SQL to pull that data and group it from the two systems, mapped it to the Global Ledger taxonomy. And then we're now processing that Global Ledger data with SQL, because as our instance files got bigger and bigger, Excel was sort of unable to handle the large volume of data. So we found SQL a little better solution to parse through and pull out that data. And then we still use Excel though, just right through the Microsoft Database Connectivity tool right in there. So we're still running the same reports and everything is still updated in the same way. And the last process, which we're sort of in the middle of, started and hope to kind of wrap up, is really automating the whole thing from a desktop application type perspective, where Skip does a journal entry at 8 o'clock and I press a button at 8:01, that entry is captured in the report and the number reflects that journal entry. So, as I mentioned, we did the mapping. This is actually a screenshot from MACPA, so there's a lot going on here, so we'll try and break it down. On the left side is kind of the database structure of our query. The middle, these are all the functions that are used to sort of manipulate that data and get it in the format we want. There's, every database has a different philosophy behind it for how the numbers are supposed to be stored, how the data is supposed to be handled, and how the data is normalized. So these functions are really just starting to break down the data and get it into a format that we want, where it can be standardized over here with the XBRL Global Ledger taxonomy. Just to get a little technical, we're using the accounting entries tuple or tuple, depending on where you stand in that debate. More specifically, the entry header and entry detail tuple. So for every accounting entry, there's going to be an entry detail tuple that has the account number, account description, audit roll-up, and so on. So compared to the next slide, this is dynamics going to XBRL Global Ledger. And you can see the functions are a little different. There's less functions needed. And that, again, that's just because how the data is stored. There's not as much white space after these values being held in here, so we have to really truncate that off and trim it. So the point I want to make here in the next two slides is that the data is held differently. So if you're going to try and compile this in a manual process, it's going to take quite a long time. So if you look at the field names, and again, this is data right in Microsoft Dynamics, just the account description, debit, credit. If you look at those field names, you compare them over to AMNet, our association management database, you can see they're a little bit different. It's account name, and that's just debit and credit. So if we're going to go and put these in Excel and try and compile this, for the past 11 years, it would take quite a bit of time to try and get everything formatted correctly, and then sort of copy and paste it and renamed over. So with XBRL Global Ledger, we're able to turn these two very different table structures and database structures into this. A bit unreadable to the human eye, looks much like the XBRL that most of you are dealing with. But this is down to the transaction level. So some of those values you saw earlier, you can see right down in here. So we're able to now standardize that data. So every time we go and pull the account main ID, we know it's the account number. Every time we want the account description, we know it's the account main description. We've also been able to include the audit roll-up and also some other roll-ups to key performance indicator metrics for various internal reports and events. Another thing is the dates down here are also standardized. You can we chose to keep it on a calendar year, but you can choose to have everything on a calendar fiscal year. So depending on which database it's coming from, you can have that all in the same, so you don't have to worry about any disconnect with timing issues or date issues. And as I mentioned earlier, this can be pulled directly into Excel. So this is that instance document pulled directly into Excel just from data import. So you can actually see that was the account number listed earlier. We're in Excel. And from here, you can go ahead and create your pivot table, your graph, or you can have it feed other applications that already exist in your organization. For example, our financial scoreboard application is an application that we've been using for probably about 11 years now. Typically, this was done a little bit after the fact, just because it was a manual process. We had to get through the year-end closing, audit, and that whole process. So we were able to automate this. We were able to compile those numbers, have them come out in a standardized way, have them roll up to the groups they need to, and then feed directly into the application. So we're able to kind of integrate the new things that we're moving forward with into past applications very easily. Another example is an audit worksheet we actually realized we could make this summer. It's a budget versus actual variance worksheet. As I mentioned earlier, we've created the data, so we're still figuring out ways to use the data. We're kind of sitting there going, oh, wow, we're not restricted by this or that, or not limited by lack of detail. We can just go at it. So we're able to realize we can just generate this directly from the data we already have standardized from an XBRL. And just an important, thing to touch on is that the data is coming directly from the database. There's no hard-coded values in the mapping anywhere. So as long as you know that the data is true in the accounting system, which you should, you know that the data on here is also true. So the auditors don't have to worry about any keying errors.